Good evening there, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this kind of frigid Friday night in January, early January. So I guess it's kind of fitting that it's frigid because it's Pittsburgh and it's January. But I thank you for joining me. And before I continue, I want to ask you, as I always do, to please like and subscribe to our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel. We bring you live shows every day and night. Earlier on Friday, you saw the Touchdown Under show with Matty Peverall and Mark Davison. We'll have post-game coverage for you Sunday after Pittsburgh plays the Browns in the regular season finale. That's hosted by Jeff Hartman, Dave Schofield, Brian Anthony Davis. Monday, we'll have The Hangover with Brian, Shannon White, and yours truly. Tuesday, we'll have the Scobro Show with Dave Schofield and Rich Schofield. Wednesday, we'll have Know Your Enemy with Shannon White and Jeffrey Benedict. Thursday, we'll have the preview with Jeff, Dave, and Brian. We also have live shows on Facebook. You can catch all those shows live on Facebook as well. And as I always say, be nice on Facebook. If you're watching me on Facebook, be nice, be kind. It's hard you're on Facebook. I realize you're filled with angst, but just try for me. And of course, you can catch all those shows after the fact and on any audio platform of your choosing. If you just rather listen to me talk than watch me talk, well, I don't blame you for that. So you can go on any audio platform of your choosing. Anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find this show and every other show on Behind the Steel Curtain's podcasting family. And we also have audio-only shows that you can catch, including Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, Bad Language with Brian Anthony Davis, the War Room with Matty Peverall, The Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, What You's Talking About with Kyle Kreis, Steelers Fix with Andrew Wilbar and Jeremy Betts, State of the Steelers with Daniel J. And I forgot about one from the live side, and that's We Run the North with Kevin Tate and his friends. So catch all those shows live and in audio only form, and you can catch them anywhere. And also, please check out Behind the website. We're bringing news, commentary, and film breakdown. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. Let's check out the live chat tonight. Who do we have? First one in? Jared Devil, of course. The man he's always up there. He's always a contender. Kathy Ford, George Teston is with us. Ruin It Brown. Rob Senior says, "What's up, Tony? Everything's good in on this side of the world." Steel Nation, Australia. Valerie Daughtery. Just Me is with us. All right. Let's see who else we have. Now, it's a nice crowd. DJ2. It's a nice crowd we have with us. All right. So let's talk about everything that happened last week, starting with Sunday night's game in Baltimore against the Ravens at M&T Bank Stadium. Wow, what another barn burner with those two teams, right? I mean, people talk about this rivalry not being what it once was, and that's true because of the stakes. They're not as high as they once were. 08, 09, 2011. These two teams were legitimately going after the Super Bowl each and every year. But still pretty good when these two teams get together. We saw that earlier in December when they faced off at Acrisure Stadium, that 16-14 win by Baltimore, a very frustrating loss by the Steelers. The what could have been game, Mitch Trubisky with the 3 picks. The defense couldn't stop the Ravens running game at all. 215 rushing yards by Baltimore that day. So would Pittsburgh be able to return the favor in round 2? And of course they did. I mean, it was almost the exact same kind of game. Low scoring, hard hitting. Baltimore led most of the way, but they could not pull away. They couldn't put Pittsburgh away, even though the offense did very little as far as scoring anyway over the first 56 minutes. 9 points, 3 field goals by Boswell, who also missed one. And also, there was that first and goal situation in the first half where they couldn't capitalize. So the offense did very little, kind of like the Raiders game. But when everything was on the line, much like the Raiders game a week earlier, Kenny Pickett, he played his best football. So many remarkable throws on that one drive alone. I mean, I thought he did a good job in that final drive against the Raiders 6 days earlier, or was it 8 days earlier? But the throws he made on this drive were amazing. The one rolling to his left when he hit Freiermuth was great. The very next play, that laser to Steven Sims, a lot of people say it's the best throw of his young career so far. It's hard to disagree with that. And, of course, the game winner, Najee Harris, rolling to his left again. And he basically anticipated Harris would be open. Some people were speculating that he was trying to throw to Steven Sims, who was coming across the end zone. But it was pretty clear if you watched it a few times, he was going for Harris. And, that's really, Kenny Pickett rolling out of the pocket and throwing to his left or to his right. That's really an elite skill that he has. It really is. Brian Baldinger talked about that in the summer. He's the first one that kind of alerted me to the comparison to Patrick Mahomes when he said in a radio appearance with whoever, I forget who it was, he said he looks like Patrick Mahomes when he rolls to his left or to his right and throws. And he cautioned himself. He said, look, I'm not comparing him. I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes. I'm saying he looks kind of like Patrick Mahomes when he does it. And then, of course, you heard it again in the summertime. Jerry Dulac, people like that who were watching him during the early portions of training camp about how that was his best trait up to that point, throwing on the run, how accurate he was, how comfortable he looked doing that. So we saw that on that drive, and we've seen it time and time again this season, but we saw it especially on that drive. The guy just looks really good when he's throwing on the run. So he put him ahead 16-13 with 56 seconds left, and then Minkah Fitzpatrick, your team MVP for 2022, according to his teammates. It was announced on Friday. Minkah Fitzpatrick finished things off with a interception of Trent Huntley, and that was all she wrote. And Pittsburgh is now 8-8. They're still alive for the playoffs. If they win this week against Cleveland at Acrisure Stadium, they'll at the very least improve to 9-8 and keep Mike Tomlin's streak of non-losing seasons alive. And some of you love that, some of you hate it, but it is what it is. But more importantly, if the Dolphins lose to the Jets and the Patriots lose to the Bills, the Steelers will be in the playoffs as the 7th seed in the AFC for the second year in a row. They got the help last year when the Jaguars beat up the Colts, who faced a win-and-you're-in scenario down in Jacksonville, and they lost to a pretty lousy Jags team on the road. They got in last year. I mean, they almost didn't get in. We all thought they were in after the slate of afternoon games when they beat Baltimore in overtime. But then the Raiders and Chargers almost finished in a tie, which would have knocked them out. But they made it last year as the 7th seed. Can they repeat that again this year? I sure hope so. And I'll be rooting hard for that to happen Sunday. It's been a great turnaround for them after starting out 2-6 and then 5-8, after they lost to the Ravens a few weeks ago. To be on the doorstep of the playoffs, I think it's pretty remarkable. And I realize that people continue to talk about how much their schedule has gotten in the second half. And while that might be true, again, this team looked like it was going to be a 4 or 5 win team going into the last last 9 games going into the bye. And that speaks volumes to who they are and and and, and, and Sorry, guys. Once again, another technical difficulty on a Friday night. And this time, I don't think it was my fault because I got a message saying it was on their end. So I don't know what that was all about, but I'm sorry. Sorry for the delay. I'll have to let Brian know there was a delay at around the 11-minute mark. But yes, I lost my train of thought. See, this is what happens to me on these Friday nights and why I want to throw my pen that I have in my hand right here. But I'm not going to do that because my mother taught me better. Not that it works all the time. I still throw my pen sometimes, but as you can see, another Friday night, another technical difficulty. So I'm very starting to make me mad. So I have to find a solution for that. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, to be 2-6 at one point, then 5-8 after that loss to the Ravens on December 11th, to come back and be 8-8 and on the doorstep of the playoffs with some help. It's pretty remarkable. And it speaks to Mike Tomlin's ability to keep his team together, keep them fighting, keep them believing. They say, well, after a while, a coach's message gets stale with the players. Well, fortunately for Mike Tomlin, he has a really young team, especially on offense. So his message has not gotten stale quite yet. And somebody asked Kathy Ford, do we root for Flacco? Yes, we do. It's a good point there, Kathy, because he's going to be the Jets quarterback this Sunday. Mike White is out, and so Joe Flacco is going to play, veteran Joe Flacco, against Skylar Thompson for the Dolphins. So you have 2 third-string quarterbacks going at it in this game. The Dolphins are still alive for the playoffs. They're playing in Miami. The Jets are eliminated. But when you're down to your third-string quarterback on either end, it's a toss-up. You just don't know what's going to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets won that game. Obviously, I want them to. We all want them to. And then the Bills and the Patriots. The Bills are obviously still reeling after the near tragedy with Damar Hamlin. But they're still going to have I'll get into the stuff later. Still going to have something to play for because they're going to want to, even though they might not be able to get the number 1 seed now, they're going to still want to tie down that number 2 seed because that's more valuable than people say it is. Because if you win a number 2 seed, or if you earn a number 2 seed going into the playoffs, if you win your first game, then you're guaranteed a second game at home. Whereas if you're the number 3 seed, you don't get a divisional round game at home. You might get an AFC championship game at home, but you can't get a divisional round game at home if you're number 3 or 4 seed going into the playoffs. Number 2 seed, you do, as long as you win your first game, of course. And to me, that's a big advantage. And it's something that people were kind of downplaying after everything that happened on Monday with the NFL canceling the game between the Bengals and the Bills when defensive back Damar Hamlin went into cardiac arrest on the field. It was really scary, and they almost lost him. He almost lost his life. So they decided to cancel the game, and a lot of people were saying, well, the Bills won't have anything to play for now because they might not get a chance at the number 1 seed. But again, the number 2 seed is pretty valuable. So more on that in a bit. But the Steelers are I think trending in the right direction as an organization. The defense looks a lot better now than it did first half of the year. Obviously, TJ Watt makes a big difference. Alex Highsmith, who I think could have been an equally legit team MVP to Mika Fitzpatrick. He's having a great year. Cam Hayward still playing at a high level. So the defense is coming back, I think. Obviously, as long as Watt's in there, the defense is gonna function much better than without him in there. So the defense is playing a lot better. They still have some things to fix for next year, to shore up for next year on that side of the ball. As far as the offense is concerned, it's an incredibly young offense. I think the line's improving each and every week. You can still debate whether or not they need to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, and they very well might, But I think those guys are coming along. Dan Moore is getting better. Kevin Dawson's getting better. Mason Cole's been an anchor all year. Jeff Daniels. James Daniels. I always get that wrong. Anyway, the Daniels fella, he's their best lineman by far. Shukes Okorafor, he's pretty steady. He's never going to be a Pro Bowler, at least not anytime soon, but I think he's steadily improving. So the line as a whole is getting better. Obviously, the skill position players they speak for themselves as far as their potential. Freiermuth, Najee, Pickens, even Steven Sims is coming along, I think. And of course, Pickett. So I think there's a chance for this team to be even better next year and make strides. People were saying earlier in the year that they didn't even think they would make the playoffs next year, let alone this year. Well, now that they have a chance to make it this year, and they're showing improvement, I feel really good about their chances of something next year, provided they make enough of the right moves and provided these young guys continue to improve, continue to make leaps from their first year to their second year to their third year, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's a question about coaching. Matt Canada, will he be here? Will he be gone? That's never far from anyone's mind when they talk about this team. But regardless of who's the coordinator next year, I think they're going to open things up for Kenny Pickett on offense. I think that's been part of the problem. I think it's been more of a mandate from Tomlin all year to keep things conservative on offense. So while Canada certainly deserves a lot of blame, I think part of his problem is his head coach is asking him to not put too much on his rookie quarterback's plate, to not take too many chances, to take care of the ball, and to leave things in the hands of the defense. And it didn't work so well over the first 8 games, but it's certainly been a much better blueprint these last 8 games, 1 to go. So on that note, at the 2010 mark, I will take this time to allow you fine folks at home to hear a word from our sponsors. I will be right back. Do not go away. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, Tony Defio, and I thank you for sticking with me. And I apologize again for the technical difficulties in the first half of the show. It's becoming one of my best friends, technical difficulties on the Six Pack. That's what I named this show, by the way, but I won't, because that would be even more sarcastic than my writing is. Anywho, let's get into the Damar Hamlin thing. And what a scary sight that was last Monday at Paul Brown Stadium. The Bills and the Bengals were going at it. It was, I think it was 7-3 Cincinnati late in the first quarter when Hamlin attempted to tackle T. Higgins, the Bengals receiver, and he fell on top of Higgins, got up, and immediately collapsed. He fell backwards. And it wasn't long before people realized that he was in serious trouble. And, trainers, doctors rushed onto the field. And as we found out, we couldn't see what was going on because Hamlin and the trainers and doctors were being surrounded by the players on both teams. So we couldn't see, but we later found out he was being administered CPR right there on the field. And his heart had gone out of a rhythm. He was out of rhythm. His heartbeat was out of rhythm. So they had to revive him right there on the field. They had to give him CPR right there on the field. And I think somebody said maybe even in a second time in the ambulance. But at any rate, he nearly lost his life right there on the field. It was probably the scariest thing I've ever seen watching sports. And well, at least in a very long time anyway. It was just, you didn't want to watch football anymore after that, and those players didn't want to play anymore after that. A lot of people have been criticized about how that went down as far as the NFL's the timetable for them finally canceling the game. There were rumors that somebody told Joe Buck on ESPN, who does the play-by-play for Monday night, that the players had 5 minutes to warm up. According to people like Troy Vincent, who's an NFL executive, and other executives, that was never mandated to anybody. I don't know who to believe, but the bottom line is they ultimately got it right, and in my opinion anyway, and canceled the game. People were critical of them in that moment. Tim Benz wrote a great article about that this week. It's easy for us to sit at home and say they need to cancel this game right now, but when you're there, when you're first of all, the most important thing at that moment was trying to save this football player's life, right? That was number one. The cancellation of the game, that was secondary. It's pointed out while the ambulance is still in the stadium with that guy, that football player that's fighting for his life. You can't cancel a game and have 70,000 people filing out into the streets of Cincinnati. Well, you have to get that ambulance to the hospital. So, yes, the league may have taken longer than people may have wanted to cancel the game. And yes, maybe they deep down wanted to continue to play the game. But at the end of the day, they got it right. And, some of the things I saw on Twitter on Monday were just sad. Like somebody said, these people paid their money. They need to play the game. And then, of course, other people were bringing other stuff into it, making it about, I won't even get into it, but it was a sad sight what people were saying, which is what you always see when something like this happens. Like Bill Maher once said, every time a national tragedy happens, everybody has another thing, and I'll leave it at that. But it was a pretty sad sight. And, there was a player that died. This is not totally unprecedented. There was a player that died on the field in 1971, I believe. I think it was a Lions receiver. He had a heart attack during the game, and he died during the game, and they kept playing. So people cited that. That happened in 71. Why couldn't they continue this game? Well, things were much different in 1971. As I pointed out a couple weeks ago, people were allowed to smoke on airplanes in 1971. We've evolved since then, and to me, the thought of playing, continuing to play a game, any kind of entertainment example you can think of, whether it's a play, a wrestling show. Like Owen Hart died in the middle of the ring back in 1999 doing a pay-per-view, and they continued the pay-per-view after that. They received a tremendous amount of crap for it too, and rightfully so. And if that were to happen today, God forbid, I guarantee you the WWE or any other wrestling organization would not continue the show. So, we've evolved since 1971. And, unless it involves the functioning of society, if somebody is critically injured or dies, you cancel whatever you're doing and you send everybody home. That's the right thing to do. So the NFL, in my opinion, got it right. And, it's going to be, I would say interesting. That's not the right word, but I wonder what's going to happen now in the future. Like if a player suffers the kind of injury that Ryan Shazier did 5 years ago, would they stop that game too? 'Cause again, we continue to evolve as a society. The thought of doing that before Monday, that would never happen. But now you have to wonder, is that going to happen? If somebody suffers a serious spinal injury during a game, or are they just going to cancel the rest of the game? Hopefully we never have to find that out. But unfortunately, it's a violent game. And that brings me to another point, and that's people talking about, always complaining about the rules and how it's devolved devolved into flag football. It's not flag football. It's never been flag football. You guys are all, most of you anyway, are draft junkies. You watch the combine, right? You see how big these guys are and how fast they run now. Even a perfectly fine form tackle is capable of doing tremendous damage. So this is not flag football, and nobody needs to be wearing any what Jack Lambert said out there. These are all warriors, so to speak, putting their future health on the line for our entertainment. So Monday was a reminder that no matter what the NFL does as far as rules and trying to protect these players, it's still an inherently violent game, and sometimes the unspeakable can happen, and we saw that on Monday. And news for Demar Hamlin is he's doing much better. His first words in written form when he woke up, I think on Wednesday, was, "Did we win the game?" So obviously he's a football guy through and through. So it was reported on Friday that he actually spoke to his teammates on FaceTime. So I'm sure that was very encouraging for them. So it's good to see. It's good to see that he's recovering and on the mend. And as far as his football future, that's far down the list right now. It's just hope that he continues to recover and make a full recovery as far as being able to function as a member of the human race. Forget about being a football player. Let's just hope that his quality of life is 100% moving forward. And of course, Damar Hamlin's from Pittsburgh. Actually, that's a story I wasn't even aware of until obviously this happened. He went to Pitt. He's from Pittsburgh, McKees Rocks, which is not far from where I live. He had a GoFundMe page for a toy drive. It was like $2,500 before this tragedy, and now it's last I checked, $7 million. So that's one example of everybody coming together. And I'm sure it's when he found that out, he was probably tickled. He was probably just really awestruck that everybody the outpouring of love for him and for his charity. So It's something that people who don't even watch football or care about football, they know who this guy is. It's just, to me, he was probably the most talked about person this week for all the wrong reasons. But it's nice to see him continuing to pull through. So let's keep our thoughts with him, and that's the most important thing. As far as how it affects the playoff picture, well, it affects it a lot, but that's just how it is. Again, these are different times than they were in 1971, and the show mustn't go on all the time. So what the NFL decided to do was basically they made that game a no contest. The Bengals-Bills game, it's a no contest, and it will not be made up. So what's going to happen is, as far as these playoffs are concerned, say the Chiefs finish number one, 14-3. If they beat the Raiders on Saturday, say the Bills finish number two after if they beat Patriots on Sunday, 13-3, and the Bengals finish 12-4, and they finish they're number three seed. What's going to happen is if either the Chiefs and the Bills or the Chiefs and the Bengals play in the AFC Championship game, it's going to be at a neutral site. What site that is, I don't know. I heard it rumored that it would be in Pittsburgh, maybe Indianapolis, maybe Detroit. I don't know. But it's going to be played at a neutral site. That's what they decided to go with. So that's one of the things. Another weird thing to come from this is the Bengals go into their final game 11-4, and they're taking on the Ravens, who are what, 10-6, and they're already in the playoffs. Obviously, the Bengals are division champs or AFC North champions based on winning percentage. The worst they can finish is 11-5, and the best the Ravens can finish is 11-6. So the Bengals already have the division. But if the Ravens beat the Bengals this week, and they're 9.5-point underdogs, if they beat them on the road in Cincinnati, and say these two teams are 3 and number 6 seed at that point, they would do a coin flip to determine who plays. If they're playing each other, and I guess in the wild card round, that's what I'm trying to say. If they play each other in the wild card round, a coin flip would determine who gets the home game. So it's a really wild scenario right there. Did the NFL do the right thing? Do the best they could with this? Maybe. I think if they wanted to make it totally fair for everybody, and when I say everybody, I don't mean the Steelers. I don't mean them. And this isn't why I'm saying this. I'm talking about the three teams that were in play for the number one seed through last Monday's game, because that's what this is all about. Because all three of those teams were still in play for the number one seed as of last Monday. In fact, if the Bills had won out, they would win the number one seed based on tiebreaker. If the Bengals won out and the Chiefs lost one more time, then I believe the Bengals would have clinched the number one seed based on tiebreakers. So that's what this is about, those three teams. So if it's about making it fair for those three teams, the best way to do it, and I realize it's going to make me sound like a Steeler homer, it would have been to add an eighth team. Why? Because then that means all three of those teams would be forced to play 3 games to get the Super Bowl. And yes, one of them would get to play all 3 of their games at home, meaning the Chiefs, but it's still, I think, playing 2 games is a much bigger advantage than playing 3 games at home, I think. So to me, that's the bigger advantage. The Chiefs are still going to get, provided they beat the Raiders on Saturday, they're still going to get a week off. Whereas the Bills and the Bengals have to play 3 games to get to the Super Bowl, whether it's at a neutral site or not. They have to play 3. The Chiefs have to play 2. So if they wanted to make it as fair as possible, I think they should have added an eighth team, which wouldn't have been the Steelers necessarily. It could have been the Jets, the Dolphins, or whatever. But that would have been the best way to do it. yeah, like say Pittsburgh, say they got in as the 8th seed. They go to the Kansas City, and the Bills play. That how it would shake out. That's how they should have done it, in my opinion. But this is still a pretty interesting way of doing it. And again, back to the Bills and the Bengals. Again, that number 2 seed is still pretty valuable. So anybody who thinks the Bills are going to rest all their starters, or a lot of their starters against the Patriots this week, I think they're wrong, because the Bills are going to want to clinch that number 2 seed at the worst. Because again, if they win their wild card game, then hopefully against the Steelers, then they're going to, hopefully they play the Steelers. I want the Steelers to win, of course, but hopefully that's who they'll be facing in that game. Then they'll get their second game in the divisional round at home. And that's, to me, that's a valuable thing to have, because theoretically, if you're the number 2 seed, you can still get all 3 of your playoff games at home if the number 1 seed doesn't make it all the way to the championship. And we saw last year, both number 1 seeds were knocked out before the championship games. So to me, that number 2 seed is still a very big carrot to dangle in front of a team, even though you don't get to buy anymore. So Ryan agree. Anybody is beating the Bills this week? Yeah, they're going to be pretty fired up to, first of all, to get that number 2 seed, but more importantly to honor their friend and teammate Damar Hamlin. So I don't really give the Patriots much of a chance this week, even though they're in a win and you're in scenario with the playoffs. I'm actually more worried about the Jets-Dolphins game, because it's such an unknown. There's just so many unknowns in that game. Again, the Jets have lost 5 in a row, and they're out of the playoffs. The Dolphins have lost 5 in a row, but they still have a chance to make the playoffs. If they win, basically they're in, right? If they win, they're in, because if they win, and I forget how the tiebreaker shakes out between them and the Patriots, because only one of them can get in. So yeah, they're still alive. So that's the end. That's a really scary one right there. The Jets and the Dolphins. The winner of that game. Who's going to show up for that game? They have a lot of injuries on both sides of the ball. The Jets are probably waiting for the season to be over with. So I'm going to be. That's what I'm really worried about. As far as the Steelers and the Browns, I look for Pittsburgh to win another low-scoring, ugly game. I'd like to see a blowout, but I've been waiting all year for that, and it just doesn't seem like it's in the cards for the Steelers in 2022/23 to have a blowout win. So I'm feeling pretty good about it, though. I'm feeling pretty good about their chances now, because of what happened last year. There's precedent that this can happen. They remarkably, this is the 6th time since 2013 that they've entered the last week facing a win and need help situation to make the playoffs. And so far they're 2-3. They didn't get it in 2013, 2018, and 2019. They lost out, but they got lucky in 2015 and again last year. So maybe this is one of those things that works out every other time. So maybe it'll happen again, and they can be 3-3. So on average. So I'm certainly looking forward to Sunday. It's going to be like a playoff atmosphere at Acrisure Stadium, and I can't wait. So on that note, I'm going to talk about one more thing. Back to Kenny Pickett. We've been talking all year about like the people who really are supporting Kenny Pickett, who are fans of his and want to believe that he could be the future of the franchise. We keep pointing to the intangibles, the leadership, the moxie, but there's more to it than that. He looks more advanced than a lot of rookie quarterbacks normally do. Tony Romo pointed this out earlier in the year. He mentioned how he stopped and watched Pickett's preseason debut against the Seahawks and said to himself, wow, usually a rookie quarterback doesn't process things this quickly like he's doing right now. So that, to me, that was something to hear Tony Romo say that earlier in the year. But you're hearing that more and more from people who know what you're talking about, that this guy is just further ahead than a lot of rookie quarterbacks are at this point. The results aren't there, but you see it in game. You see some of the things in game. JT O'Sullivan, who's a former quarterback in the NFL, I think he's a quarterback's coach now. He did a great 30-minute film breakdown the other day. Really, really fascinating, because I really don't like film, but he did it. I learned stuff, learned a lot. And essentially what he was saying is that there's a lot of meat on that bone still for Kenny Pickett. He just has to continue to learn and get better and process things quicker from play to play. But like even plays where he's scrambling to his left or to his right, there are plays there where if he wouldn't bail so soon, this guy's open or that guy's open in the structure of the play. But he also pointed out that just because he's not seeing things on every play doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, because when he does roll out, he's showing off one of his elite traits. And he's always going to have that, the ability to throw accurately on the run. He showed that several times on Sunday. He's been showing it all year. So the point he was trying to make is, yes, he still has some work to do, but the throws that he makes are top-notch NFL caliber throws. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but his arm is definitely strong enough to make all the throws necessary to be successful at the professional level. And it was really an eye-opener to me. And that was what people like me were trying to say all year, is yes, the results aren't there for him right now. But you can see the potential there for him to eventually be a successful quarterback. You can see it. He just has to figure things out. And most quarterbacks don't figure it out right away. It takes them a while. It takes them a year. It takes them 2 years, 3 years sometimes to truly put it all together. Josh Allen's a great example. There's so many other great examples. Even Ben Roethlisberger, as I've said many times, his rookie year, he was severely limited in terms of the playbook. Bill Cowher said as much in his book. He was just propped up by a great team around him. Whereas Kenny Pickett's been asked to kind of lead a young team that's still trying to find answers. So I'm very excited about what I saw from Kenny Pickett the other night. And that was the first, in my opinion, wow moment of his career because of how he looked in that drive. I mean, the pass to Pickens, that touchdown pass against the Raiders was great, but in that drive was great. But how he looked on this drive, that was the first time that I really, truly said, this is why they drafted that guy in the first round. You could see it right before your eyes. This is why they spent a first-round pick on him. This is why he was the top quarterback in the draft. Okay? This is why they think he could be their future. This drive right here, these throws that he's making, is very, very exciting to see. And I'm very excited about the future of Kenny Pickett. So that's all I wanted to say. And now I'll open things up to some questions and highlight comments. And this one from Brian Brown. And he says, Tony, do you think the Steelers really need a defensive lineman more than a cornerback or an inside linebacker? What about Leal and Loudermilk? Well, I'm very high on Leal. Loudermilk, I'm not so sure. But Leal, I definitely like him. Do I think they need that more than a cornerback or an inside linebacker? Not necessarily. I think those are all vital needs for them going into the offseason, into the draft, into free agency. I think they're both important, or all three of them are important. But I think if I had to rank them, if you can get Larry Ogunjobi to come back next year, and that's a big if I had to rank them, I would put defensive line third behind cornerback and inside linebacker. I still want to see them get a special cornerback. Might be a little harder now because they're going to be drafting closer to 20 than they are to 10, I think. But I'd still like to see them hit on one finally. So I'd rank them at this point: cornerback, inside linebacker, and then defensive line. But again, it all depends on when the draft actually gets here, which it's 3-4 months away. when it finally gets here, who's there when they're drafting and who's the best value, so that's, so where they're ranked is one thing as far as importance, as far as need, but it's who's there when the time comes. That's also important. And this one is from Minra, Jane, and Bird, who asked, what's the choice of beverage this evening? Nothing. I don't have anything. Otherwise, I would have drank that whole sucker when I had my technical difficulties. I would have been drinking on the air like Ron Burgundy. I think that's what he did. Anyway, no, I don't have anything right now. Maybe some quote unquote pop after the show, but maybe some cherry vodka or something. I don't know. It's Friday night. It's all on the table. This one is from Brian Brown again. Do you think Boz gets his kick straightened out? Yeah, of course. I mean, he had that injury. He struggled a bit in 2018, and he was fine between 2018 and the time he suffered his injury to put him on the IR. So he'll be fine again. Hopefully it won't affect him this Sunday. But I am confident that he'll be fine by next offseason. He didn't just suddenly forget how to kick. He's just going through a tough time there right now after an injury. We saw it with Najee Harris earlier in the year. What's wrong with Najee Harris? He's a bust. Well, wouldn't you know it? After his Liz Frank injury finally healed, what do you know? He's pulling people over every game now. Just Me says her beverage of choice is hot tea. That's a very good choice. All right. What else do we have here? Oh, here's one from Brian Brown again. Do you think Deontay Johnson will ever get a TD pass this year? Wouldn't it be funny if it was the game winner in the fourth quarter and to put them in the playoffs? Talk about a hero, right? And Dwayne, who joins us from YouTube, says his drink of choice is Hennessy and Coke. Well, there you go. It's all on the table, folks. We're all being honest on a Friday. Let her down. Carrie says diet ginger ale and for her, there you go. Nothing wrong with that. All right, let's see what else we got here. What else? Football related. Carrie says Kenny Pickett and a successful fourth quarter comeback in the last minute of the games. Impressive. Yes, first rookie ever in the history. Kyle Kreis wrote an article about this on Friday. First rookie quarterback in history to throw a game-winning touchdown pass in the final minute 2 weeks in a row against the Raiders and against the Ravens. And wow, wasn't that a delicious way to beat the Ravens with Kenny Pickett introducing himself to this fine Ravens-Steelers rivalry as a rookie? Yes, I love it. This one is from Jarrett Tiffany Jones, who says Pickett's anticipation is crazy good. Yes, I mean you can see it. I mean he talked about that 28-yard pass to Steven Sims, the seam route. He talked about how you had to trust each other. The two people had to trust each other on that pass, and he had to trust that Sims would bend the way he did. And Sims had to trust that Pickett would lay it right in there, and he did. It was a great throw. I mean, that throw was just, to me, that looked like the quintessential big time quarterback throw, 5-step drop, whatever it was, and he just let it rip. He looked to his left, let it rip, in between three guys. It was great. Clyde Bishop says of the draft, the Steelers' first two picks should be linebackers. You mean inside linebackers, of course, right? And I'm sure that, as we talked about earlier, it's on the table. So, again, though, it all depends on what prospects are out there and who's considered a first-round pick inside linebacker this year. And this one from Paul Kern from Facebook, who says, I watched every Pitt game last season. It didn't take much to realize Pickett's pocket awareness is far superior than other QBs. There you go. And he still has a lot of work to do in that regard because, as J.T. O'Sullivan pointed out, he didn't always trust his protection. Sometimes he bailed too soon. But then again, can you blame him for not always trusting his protection based on his brief history is behind that protection? Again, they're getting better, but they're still a work in progress. But I think it further in this 30-minute film tutorial further illustrated to me, and I think to everybody, if they watch it, just everything that goes into being a quarterback in the NFL. Your lineman's calling our protection, and sometimes there's a free blitzer that you have to account for on your own. They're not going to pick him up. If they pick up, they're responsible for their guys, and they can't pick this guy up. So you gotta be responsible for him, and you gotta hit the right read, and you gotta avoid him to do that. So that's part of it. And then when you make a 3-step drop, you gotta this is your first option. If it's a 5-step drop, maybe all these guys are running the same routes. This is your first option. There's so much that goes into it. So when people are just like willing to write these guys off after a year, even 2, I just want to, I don't have much hair left, but I want to pull it out, right? And that's why I wonder, like, how many teams give up on perfectly fine quarterbacks far too soon, right? And I don't think Pittsburgh's going to be one of those teams that gives up too soon on Kenny Pickett. Again, they were very thorough last year. It is last year officially. Last year in the pre-draft process with all these quarterbacks, everybody and their mother went down to Mobile, Alabama. They went to the combine. They were very, very, very thorough with their research. They decided on Kenny Pickett. It's the first time they drafted a quarterback in the first round since Ben Roethlisberger. They're not going to just like, all right, that's it. They're not going to pull a Josh Rosen and go out and pick Kyler Murray, even though that was obviously the right choice for them. Because Josh Rosen's basically out of the league by now, but they're gonna let this play out. They're gonna let the process play out. They're gonna give Pickett, in my estimation, 3 years, and if he hasn't made progress by then, they're probably gonna move on. So, on that note, at the 52:36 mark, I will bid you guys adieu. It was a great show. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. In my defense, it wasn't my fault this time. According to StreamYard, it was their fault. So I have to take the blame off myself every now and then. Usually it is my fault though, but not this time. So I apologize again. But anyway, enough about me and my complaining and whining. Enjoy that final week. Hopefully the Steelers can do the impossible, the seemingly impossible, and make it into the playoffs. And we have something to look forward to next week. Will it be a daunting task to beat the Bills or the Bengals or whoever they play in that first round? Of course, but it's still going to be a lot of fun to talk about. So hopefully we get to talk about it. Anyway, enjoy that game. Enjoy the final week of the season.